The billionaire sees his pregnant ex-wife working as a waitress. What happened next changed everything. Chinedu Okoro had a solid gold Montblanc pen suspended in the air. He was 3 millimeters away from signing the most lucrative contract of his life when the entire world stopped spinning. He was seated at the main table of the Royal Plate, the most exclusive and elitist restaurant in Ikoyi, Lagos. Around him, 3 real estate executives awaited his signature to close a 40 million naira acquisition. Everything was perfect. Chinedu's navy blue suit was impeccable, tailor-made, no tie, but projecting the absolute power of a 32-year-old man who had conquered the city. His short, perfectly sculpted beard, his dominant posture. He was the king of Lagos, a man who always won, a man who had overcome the greatest humiliation of his life, or so he believed. His gaze, cold and calculating, drifted for a second from the paper on the white-clothed table, and that's when he saw her. The impact stole the oxygen from his lungs. It was like crashing into a concrete wall at 200 kilometers per hour. About 15 meters away, in the least illuminated area of the dining room, a woman was cleaning a table. The contrast was violent, almost grotesque. Amidst the elegant golden decor, marble, and fine crystal, the woman wore a cheap, worn, glaring orange cleaning uniform with white collars and edges. She clashed completely, but it wasn't the uniform that paralyzed Chinedu. It was her, Amara, his ex-wife. The pen slipped from Chinedu's fingers and struck the glass table with a dry sound, staining the million naira document with a thick drop of black ink. "Everything in order, Chinedu?" one of the executives asked, frowning. Chinedu didn't respond, didn't blink, didn't breathe. His dark eyes were fixed on the woman in the distance. His mind, accustomed to processing numbers and strategies in fractions of a second, collapsed before the irrational image in front of him. 9 months ago, Amara Nwafor, the woman he loved with blind devotion, had thrown divorce papers in his face. She had told him she was fed up with him, that she had found someone better, someone who actually had time for her, and had left without taking a single naira, supposedly to live a luxury romance in Europe with a European heir. Chinedu had spent almost a year hating her, swallowing the poison of betrayal, drowning his pain in work, until he became a steel magnet, cold and untouchable. But the woman 15 meters away was not in Paris. She wasn't covered in jewels or wearing haute couture. Amara was frantically, erratically scrubbing the wood of a table with a white cloth, as if her life depended on removing a sauce stain. Her light brown hair, which once always fell in perfect waves, was now pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her fair skin was reddened. Thick drops of sweat ran down her forehead and neck. She looked gaunt, pale, with deep violet circles under her eyes, her gaze fixed downwards, completely broken. And then Amara turned in profile to reach the other end of the table. Chinedu's heart stopped dead. Beneath that suffocating, cheap orange uniform, Amara's belly was enormous, round, heavy, and low. A very advanced pregnancy, at least 8 months. Chinedu's brain made the mathematical calculation with lightning speed. 9 months of divorce, 8 months of pregnancy. "No," Chinedu murmured, his voice rough, barely a whisper in his throat. "Chinedu, Mr. Okoro," insisted the lawyer across the table, alarmed by the cadaverous pallor that had covered the businessman's face. Chinedu pushed himself to his feet. The heavy oak chair screeched violently against the marble floor, drawing curious glances from a couple of nearby tables. Chinedu didn't care. He didn't care about the contract, or the 40 million, or his reputation. All the noise of the luxurious restaurant, the clinking of crystal glasses, the silver cutlery, the soft laughter of the Lagos elite, faded, becoming a dull hum. He only saw her. Amara paused for a second, dropped the cloth on the table, and put a hand to the base of her back, arching with an expression of mute pain. She was breathing through her mouth, exhausted, as if the weight of her own body and the creature within her were about to break her spine. That woman who was once the owner of half his empire. The woman who walked with her head held high and a radiant smile. Now she looked like a cornered animal on the verge of physical collapse. Chinedu took the first step toward her. His fists were clenched so tightly at his sides, beneath his navy blue suit, that his knuckles turned white. A toxic mixture of anger, confusion, and visceral panic began to boil in his veins. What the hell was happening? Where was the millionaire lover? Why was the woman who destroyed his life cleaning other people's messes? And whose child was this that deformed her body and forced her to drag her feet? Chinedu advanced down the central aisle, dodging a waiter. His serious, implacable, and contemplative gaze never left her. He was going to demand answers. He was going to destroy her with words if necessary. He was going to make her pay for every sleepless night. But before he could reach her, another figure stepped into the scene, blocking Amara's path. It was Bode Olusola, the general manager of the Royal Plate, a 4-5-year-old man in an immaculate grey suit, with a tense face and the arrogance of someone who enjoys humiliating those beneath his status. Chinedu stopped 3 meters away, partially hidden by a large marble column and an extravagant floral arrangement. He was close enough to hear everything but out of his ex-wife's field of vision. Bodhi looked at the table Amara had just cleaned, then ran an index finger along the wooden edge. He lifted it into the air with disgust, as if he had touched something radioactive. "Is this what you call cleaning, Okafor?" the manager hissed. His voice was low but laden with venom, designed not to disturb the wealthy customers but perfect for destroying his employee. "I pay you to make this place shine, not to spread dirt from one side to the other." Amara immediately lowered her head. Chinedu felt a lash to his chest at seeing that gesture. The Amara he knew never, under any circumstances, bowed her head to anyone. She was fierce, proud, a woman who wouldn't be trampled. Now her chin touched her chest in an act of absolute submission. I'm sorry, Mr. Olusola," Amara replied, her voice trembling, hoarse from dehydration. "I'll wipe it down again right away. I just got a little dizzy. It was only for a second." "I don't care about your shoddy excuses." Bode cut her off, approaching her intimidatingly. Amara, with difficulty due to her enormous belly, took a clumsy step backward. "You've been dragging yourself around the dining room all week. If you keep moving like a snail, you're out on the street today." "No, please," she pleaded, raising her gaze for the first time. Chinedu's eyes widened at the absolute terror on the face of the woman he loved. "Mr. Olusola, please, I need this job. The rent is due Friday, and I don't have money for the clinic. I swear I'll be faster. Don't fire me. I beg you." The sound of Amara's plea cut through Chinedu's chest like a jagged knife. He felt blood pounding in his ears. The anger he felt toward her just 2 minutes ago was mutating into a dark, primitive, and dangerous instinct. He wanted to kill Bode Olusola with his bare hands. "That bump you're carrying isn't my problem, Okafor," Bode spat, pointing at the enormous belly beneath the orange uniform. "I don't give a damn if you're pregnant. Nobody forced you to open your legs. You come here to work. If you can't keep up because your child weighs too much, go beg on the streets, which is where you belong. You have 3 minutes to make this area spotless, or you grab your rags and leave. Understood?" The cruelty of the words echoed in the small area. A thick, silent tear rolled down Amara's cheek, mixing with sweat. She pressed her lips together, holding back a sob, and nodded frantically. "Yes, sir. Understood." "I'll make it spotless," she murmured, grabbing the cloth with uncontrollably trembling hands and beginning to rub the wood desperately, bending her body with evident agony. Bodhi smiled with satisfaction, adjusting the lapels of his jacket, turning to leave, but he didn't get far. A hand the size of a dinner plate closed around his neck from behind, grabbing the fabric of his grey suit so tightly that his shirt buttons threatened to pop. The manager choked on a gasping sound as he was violently pulled backward. He came face to face with Chinedu Okoro's darkened expression. Chinedu's eyes were no longer those of a calculating businessman. They were those of a predator, a second away from tearing his prey apart. "Do you have a problem with her, trash?" Chinedu growled, his voice resonating in a deep, lethal baritone, loud enough for the murmur of nearby tables to immediately cease. Bode paled to the color of ash. He knew Chinedu Okoro. All the Lagos elite knew the real estate magnate. He was one of the city's most important and feared clients. "Mr. Okoro," the manager stammered, trembling under the grip that threatened to cut off his breath. "I was just correcting staff. I didn't mean to bother you." The sound of the name Okoro had an electric effect 2 meters away. Amara, who was rubbing the table with tears in her eyes, froze completely. The white cloth slipped from her fingers, falling in slow motion to the floor. The oxygen seemed to be sucked out of the room. Slowly, with absolute terror disfiguring her features, Amara turned her face. Her breathing stopped. Her hands instinctively clung to the sides of her bulging belly, as if trying to protect the baby from the approaching gaze. Chinedu released Bode with a brutal shove, sending the manager stumbling and falling to his knees on the marble. But Chinedu no longer looked at the man on the floor. His eyes were fixed directly on Amara. The silence in the restaurant was sepulchral. The gazes of the millionaires around were fixed on the scene. The tension was so dense it could be cut with a crystal. Chinedu looked her up and down the humiliating uniform, the dark circles, the panic in her brown eyes. And finally that enormous 8-month belly. Amara took a step back, bumping into a tray of empty glasses a waiter had left nearby. The tray crashed to the floor. The sound of glass shattering into 1,000 pieces broke the silence like a gunshot. But neither of them flinched. They stood face to face, the betrayed magnate and the shattered ex-wife. "See, Chinedu," Amara whispered, her lips trembling uncontrollably, backing up another step, wanting to disappear, to flee, to die before he asked the only question she had sworn never to answer. Chinedu took a step toward her, crushing the broken glass with his Italian shoes, his eyes burning with pain and rage. 9 months, Amara. Chinedu's voice was low, rough, and resonated in the absolute silence. 9 months since you fled. Chinedu looked down at her belly, the calculation shining like a death sentence in his pupils. 8 months pregnant. Amara covered her mouth with her hands, stifling a choked sob, backing until her back hit the wall. There was no escape. The wall she had built to protect him from the truth had just collapsed before her eyes. The silence in the royal plate was absolute, thick, almost suffocating. The dozens of Millionaire diners, accustomed to complaining if the wine wasn't at the exact temperature, now held their breath. Nobody moved a muscle. On the marble floor, Bode, the feared manager, remained on his knees, rubbing his reddened neck, paralyzed by the contained violence emanating from Chinedu Okoro's navy blue suit. But Chinedu saw no one else. The entire world had narrowed to the woman cornered against the wall, Amara, his Amara, or the woman she once was. Chinedu's brain, a machine trained to devour financial data and detect fraud in seconds, now worked at dizzying speed, but not with bank account numbers, with months, with dates, with memories that burned his blood. 9 exact months since that rainy afternoon when she threw the wedding rings on the granite countertop of their mansion. 9 months since she looked at him with glacial contempt, claiming he wasn't enough, that she had found a real man, a European businessman who would give her the world. Chinedu denied her by always working. 9 months since she disappeared without a trace, blocking his calls, erasing herself from the map. And now, in front of him, a belly screaming an anatomical truth impossible to hide. 8 months. The clash of gazes was devastating. Chinedu searched Amara's brown eyes for the cold, calculating woman who had abandoned him, but he didn't find her. Instead, he only saw a wounded, terrified animal. Her thin, rough hands, once always adorned with perfect manicures and diamonds, were now red, cracked by cleaning chemicals, and clutched her bulging belly with an instinctive, protective force. 8 months. Chinedu's voice was not a shout. It was a hoarse whisper, loaded with a poison that paralyzed Amara. "You are 8 months pregnant." Amara swallowed. Panic gripped her chest, cutting off her breath. Her eyes filled with tears that refused to fall. She knew Chinedu was brilliant. She knew he wouldn't take more than 5 seconds to do the math. If she had left 9 months ago and the baby was 8 months old, conception occurred exactly in the weeks before the divorce, weeks in which they still shared the same bed. "Chinedu, please," she pleaded in a whispered voice, pressing against the fine wood-paneled wall, as if wanting to merge with it. "Go. Don't make a scene here. Go." Chinedu let out a dry laugh, devoid of any humor, a sound that made the nearest waiters tremble. "Don't make a scene? You disappear. You destroy my life. You tell me you're going to Paris with a magnate who's going to treat you like a queen, and I find you scrubbing grime in Lagos, starving and about to give birth." Chinedu took a step forward, closing the distance. His imposing figure covered Amara with his shadow. The scent of his expensive cologne, wood, and spices hit Amara, unearthing 1,000 memories that struck her like a sledgehammer in the stomach. "The math doesn't add up, Amara." Chinedu raised his voice for the first time, a roar that echoed in the double-height ceiling of the restaurant. 9 months without seeing you, 8 months pregnant. Who is the father? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Bode, from the floor, tried to intervene, terrified of losing his job or the prestige of the place. "That's Mr. Okoro. If the employee is bothering you, security can escort her out through the service door immediately." Chinedu didn't even look at him. He turned his face barely 1 millimeter, his dark eyes distilling homicidal fury. "If you open your mouth again to call her an employee or try to touch her, I swear to God I will buy this restaurant today, just for the pleasure of destroying it with you inside. Shut up and don't move." Bode paled and cowered, closing his mouth tightly. Amara took advantage of that second of distraction. The instinct for survival, or rather, the instinct to protect the secret that had cost her everything, took hold of her. She couldn't let him ask questions. She couldn't let him investigate. If Chinedu discovered the truth, the men who had threatened her would come after him, put him in prison, or worse. With a quick movement, driven by pure adrenaline, Amara clumsily pushed a chair into the aisle, blocking Chinedu's path, and ran, or at least tried to. Running with the weight of 8 months of pregnancy and a malnourished body was more of a desperate stumble. She spun on her worn rubber heels and dashed toward the swinging kitchen doors. "Amara!" Chinedu bellowed, surprise freezing him for a microsecond before his long strides reacted. She pushed the metallic kitchen doors with both hands. The heat from the ovens, the smell of grease, seared meat, and the shouting of chefs enveloped her. She entered like an orange hurricane, tripping among the cooks, knocking over a tray of clean vegetables. "Watch out, Amara!" shouted a kitchen assistant, barely dodging her. "Out of the way!" was the roar that followed. The swinging doors opened violently again, hitting the wall. Chinedu Okoro entered the kitchen, ignoring health regulations, ignoring the chaos he left in his wake. His designer suit didn't fit into that inferno of stainless steel and grease, but he advanced like a war tank. Amara looked back over her shoulder. Terror injected into her eyes. She reached the back emergency door, pushed it with all the weight of her body, and burst out into the Lagos night. The clang of the metal door closing echoed against the brick walls. The Royal Plate's back alley was the exact reverse of the coin. Inside, everything was luxury, soft music, and French perfumes. Outside, it reeked of rotting garbage, retained dampness in the asphalt, and the suffocating city smog. A flickering bulb cast a sick yellow light on the industrial trash bins. Amara leaned against the cold brick wall, breathing through her mouth in hoarse gasps. Her heart pounded so hard against her ribs that she feared they would break. She clutched her belly with both hands, feeling a sharp pang at the base of her pelvis. The baby moved, kicking hard, agitated by the level of stress and adrenaline flooding its mother's bloodstream. "Calm down, my love, calm down," Amara whispered, her voice broken, closing her eyes tightly, praying that Chinedu hadn't followed her, praying he would let her go. But fate, and Chinedu Okoro, never accepted no for an answer. The heavy metal door was kicked open with a brutal bang. Chinedu stepped into the alley. The contrast of the darkness made him pause for a second until his eyes adjusted. And there he saw her, cowering by the garbage cans, dirty, trembling, wrapped in that cursed orange uniform that churned his stomach with indignation and pain. He walked toward her with slow, heavy, predatory steps. Each step echoed on the wet asphalt. Amara lifted her chin, forcing herself to rebuild the wall of ice that had saved her 9 months ago. She had to lie. She had to be cruel. If she showed weakness, he would dig until he found the truth of why she abandoned him. "Go, Chinedu," Amara yelled before he was 2 meters away. "I don't want to see you. Leave me alone." Chinedu stopped scant centimeters from her. He was so tall that she had to look up. His face was tense, the veins in his neck bulging with contained rage. There was not an ounce of the loving, gentleman who used to prepare her breakfast on Sundays. In front of her was the Lagos street shark. "I'm not going anywhere, Amara. Not until you tell me what the hell this means." Chinedu pointed with a brusque nod of his head at the woman's belly. "Explain it to me, because my accountant could sum this mess up better. You leave saying you hate me, that you have a magnate waiting for you. You leave without asking for alimony, without taking a single kobo, supposedly to live in Europe. And 9 months later, I find you mopping up vomit in a restaurant in my city, weighing 10 kilograms less, and 8 months pregnant." Amara clenched her fists, her nails dug into her palms. "It's none of your business. My life is no longer yours." "Of course it is," Chinedu roared, hitting the brick wall with his clenched fist right next to Amara's head. The impact caused small pieces of mortar to fall. Amara jumped in fright but didn't look away. "Look me in the eyes, Amara. Tell me the truth. Is that child mine?" The question detonated in the alley. The silence that followed was only interrupted by their agitated breathing and the electric hum of the broken lamp. Chinedu lowered his gaze to her belly. His breathing became erratic. A mixture of terrified hope and desolate fury crossed his face. If that baby was his, if his own child had been cleaning tables, starving, dragging himself across the floor while he closed Millionaire deals, toasting with champagne, the guilt would destroy him. Amara saw the vulnerability in his eyes. She saw how the businessman's armor cracked for a second. It broke her soul. She wanted to hug him. She wanted to cry on his expensive chest, staining his pricey suit, and tell him she loved him, that she never stopped loving him, that she sold all her valuables to pay the extortionists who threatened to fabricate evidence to put him in a federal prison. She wanted to tell him the child was his, But the thugs had been clear. If he finds out, we not only jail him, we kill him in prison. You leave and disappear. And if you speak, the bastard won't be born. Amara swallowed the knot of tears, hardened her jaw, and summoned strength from despair. Her face transformed, adopting a mask of forced, cold, and empty arrogance. "Don't be delusional, Chinedu," she said, spitting out the words with a contempt that burned her throat. "The child isn't yours, it's his, the man I left you for." Chinedu felt a bucket of ice water dump down his neck. Physical pain shot through him. His muscles tensed until they ached. His? Chinedu let out an ironic, harsh laugh, full of disbelief and resentment. The European millionaire? And where is he? Why is a magnate's wife cleaning Bode Olusola's messes dressed in orange? Where are your luxuries, Amara? Amara averted her gaze, unable to sustain the lie in front of his penetrating eyes. She looked at the trash. "He abandoned me," she blurted out the lie, her voice trembling but maintaining the character. "It was a mistake. I was stupid. The scoundrel dumped me when I told him I was pregnant. He cancelled my cards and left me stranded. I had to return to Lagos. I had to find any work just to keep from starving." Chinedu processed every word. His eyes scanned Amara's face like a lie detector. He observed her lip, chapped from dehydration. He observed the stoop of her shoulders. He observed the shame on her face. "So that's it," Chinedu murmured, stepping back half a pace, as if her mere proximity contaminated him. "You exchanged me for a fantasy. You went to roll around with an idiot for money, and when he left you with the problem in your belly, you ended up sweeping misery. Karma's a ruthless bitch, isn't it, Amara?" Chinedu's words were like direct knife thrusts to her heart. Amara felt like she was drowning, but she nodded slowly, accepting the punishment, accepting the hatred in the eyes of the man for whom she was sacrificing her life. "Yes, Chinedu," she whispered, a treacherous tear finally escaping and rolling down her dirty cheek. "I'm stupid. You're right. You've seen how miserable I am. You've had your revenge. Now, please, leave. Let me keep working so I can buy diapers for my child." Chinedu looked at her for a long second. The hatred was evident, yes, but Chinedu Okoro's intelligence wasn't extinguished by anger. There was something in Amara's voice. There was something in the way she clenched her teeth, in the way her body trembled, not from fear, but from physical pain. The pieces didn't quite fit. The self-serving, ruthless woman she described wouldn't ask for forgiveness with her eyes while spitting venom with her mouth. But pride is a blind monster. Chinedu straightened his posture, adjusted the lapels of his jacket with a calculating gesture, putting back on his unbreakable armor of steel. His face became an inexpressive, lethal mask. "I pity you, Amara," he said, his voice cold as ice. "I hope minimum wage is enough for your pride." Without another word, Chinedu Okoro turned around and walked back to the restaurant's back door. He opened it forcefully, entered the kitchen, and let the metal door slam shut behind him, leaving Amara alone in the darkness of the alley. The instant he disappeared, Amara's knees gave out. She collapsed onto the dirty asphalt, clutching her belly tightly, and broke into a desolate, silent, gut-wrenching cry, drowning in her own pain amidst the garbage. She had saved Chinedu once more. But inside, Chinedu did not walk toward the exit door. He walked directly to his table, picked up his phone, and dialed a number. His instinct burned like a deafening alarm. Amara's version was perfect, too perfect to be real, and he was going to discover the truth, no matter the cost. Chinedu Okoro crossed the swinging kitchen doors in reverse, leaving behind the inferno of heat and pans to re-enter the chilly, perfumed air of the royal plate. His face was a mask carved from granite. No one in the luxurious dining room dared to look him directly in the eyes, but everyone felt the lethal vibration emanating from his navy blue suit. A few meters away, by the service station, Bode Olusola, the general manager, stood stiff as a board, sweating cold and wiping his forehead with a silk handkerchief. He trembled, knowing he had crossed a line that could cost him his career. Chinedu ignored Bode as if he were a crushed cockroach on the marble and walked with long, decisive strides to the central table. The three real estate executives, who had been petrified for 10 minutes, straightened up immediately upon his arrival. The lead lawyer, a gray-haired man in a gray suit, forced a nervous smile and pushed the ink-stained contract to the center of the glass table. "Chinedu, glad you're back," the lawyer said, clearing his throat, pretending the scene of physical violence and public humiliation he had just witnessed had never happened. "I suppose it was a misunderstanding with staff. Shall we continue? Here's the pen." Only your signature is needed to close the acquisition of the royal plate for the agreed 40 million. Chinedu stood in front of the oak chair. He did not pick up the solid gold Mont Blanc pen. He didn't even look down at the paper. His eyes, dark and turbulent, swept across the restaurant's ostentatious ceiling, the crystal chandeliers, the mahogany walls, and finally fixed on the service door through which Amara had fled. That image wouldn't let him breathe. His ex-wife, the haughty woman who demanded greenhouse roses every Friday, hidden among garbage in an alley, terrified, protecting an 8-month belly. Something was disgustingly wrong with that entire equation. "The deal is off," Chinedu blurted out. His voice was low, flat, cutting the air like a guillotine. The three men at the table opened their eyes wide. The gray-haired lawyer jumped to his feet, paling. "What, Chinedu? For God's sake, we've been negotiating this for 3 months. The price is a steal. The market is at its peak. You can't back out now over an altercation with a waitress. We'll give you an additional discount. How about it? 5% off for the trouble." Chinedu placed both hands on the glass table and leaned his large frame toward the executives. The silent threat in his posture made the three men instinctively lean back in their chairs. "You're not listening to me," Chinedu said, pronouncing each syllable with chilling slowness. "I don't want the restaurant. I'm no longer interested in buying the commercial space." He paused, letting panic settle on the sellers' faces before delivering the final blow. "I want the entire building." The silence at the table was absolute. The lawyer blinked, unable to process the twist. "The commercial tower, Chinedu, that's not for sale. And even if it were, we're talking about more than 200 million naira. The owners won't give up the main property. Everything has a price." Chinedu cut him off, straightening up and buttoning his jacket with a crisp movement. "Offer them 250 million. Cash. Immediate transfer within 24 hours. Close the deal today before midnight." 250? That's insane, Chinedu. You're brutally overpaying. No analyst would approve this whim. Why on earth do you want the entire building? Chinedu turned his head slightly and fixed his murderous gaze directly on Bode Olusola, who was petrified in the distance, half listening to the conversation. "Because as the owner of the restaurant, I am a simple investor. As the owner of the building, I am God on this piece of land." Chinedu raised his voice enough for the manager to hear him. "And my first divine order will be that the royal plate has a new owner, a new contract will be drafted, and the first non-negotiable clause demands the immediate dismissal of Bode Olusola, without severance, without a letter of recommendation. And if he dares to sue, I will use my entire corporate legal team to ensure he never gets another job, not even cleaning toilets at a gas station. Was I clear?" The lawyer swallowed hard, nodding frantically, terrified by the display of pure, unhinged power Chinedu had just deployed. "Clear, Chinedu. I'll draft the offer immediately." Chinedu turned and walked toward the main exit. As he advanced between the tables, he pulled out his cell phone and dialed the only number that mattered to him at that moment. It wasn't his assistant's or his bank's. It was Captain Tunde's, his head of security and private investigator, a former military specialist in intelligence who could find a ghost at the bottom of the sea, if paid enough. "Tunde," he answered on the second ring. "Mr. Okoro." "Tunde, drop whatever you're doing now," Chinedu ordered, pushing open the heavy glass doors of the restaurant and stepping out into the warm Lagos night. "I need a full report on Amara Nwafor, my ex-wife." "Sir, I thought that matter was closed 9 months ago when she left for Paris." "She never reached Paris, Tunde. I just saw her. She's here in Ikoyi. She's working as a cleaner, and she's 8 months pregnant." There was a tense silence on the other end of the line. Tunde, accustomed to extreme situations, immediately knew the gravity of the matter from the fractured tone in his boss's voice. "Understood, sir. What perimeter should I search?" "Everything," Chinedu growled, getting into the back of his armored SUV as his chauffeur closed the door. "I want her bank accounts. I want medical records from public and private hospitals. I want security footage from ATMs. I want to know where she sleeps, what she eats, who she talks to, and what the hell she has done every single day since she crossed the threshold of my mansion 9 months ago. I want to know who the lover who supposedly got her pregnant is, or if he ever even existed. That requires hacking closed systems, boss. It's expensive and takes time. I don't give a damn about the cost," Chinedu yelled, hitting the back of the co-driver's seat with his clenched fist, making the inside of the SUV tremble. "I pay you to bring me truths, not excuses. I want her stripped bare on paper, and I want that damn file on my desk before dawn. If you don't have it by 6 a.m., you're fired." "Yes, sir. Hands on deck." Chinedu hung up the call and threw the phone onto the leather seat beside him. He covered his face with both hands, rubbing his eyes in desperation. The image of Amara in the alley, trembling, humiliated, rubbing her belly with her cracked hands, replayed in his mind like a horror movie on loop. "I pity you," he had told her. Chinedu clenched his teeth until his jaw ached. If the child was that stupid millionaire's, he himself would see to it that both of them were ruined. But if the numbers added up, if that 8-month belly was the result of their last nights together, Chinedu knew in that instant that the world was going to burn. The discovery of the abyss. It was 4:15 a.m. The main office of Okoro Real Estate, on the 40th floor of one of Lagos's tallest towers, was shrouded in gloom. Only Chinedu's desk lamp cast a cone of cold light onto the immense tempered glass table. Behind him, floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city sleeping, a carpet of orange and white lights that seemed infinite. Chinedu hadn't taken off his suit. He had been pacing in circles for hours like a caged lion, drinking black coffee that already tasted like acid in his empty stomach. He couldn't close his eyes without seeing Amara's terrified gaze. The sound of the electronic door opening broke the silence of the early morning. Captain Tunde entered. He wore a dark leather jacket, and his face, weathered by years in the military, looked unusually pale and tense. In his hands, he carried a thick, bulging manila envelope that seemed to weigh a ton. Chinedu stopped dead. His breathing quickened. "Tell me you have it, Tunde." Tunde walked to the desk and dropped the envelope on the glass with a dry, heavy, definitive thud. He didn't look Chinedu in the eyes. "I have it, sir. We tracked everything. We crossed data from the tax authorities, social security records, C4 urban cameras, and hacked into the history of her cancelled cards. I have everything." Chinedu approached the desk, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for the envelope. "Who is the guy?" His voice was hoarse, refusing to open the package. "Who is the European? Where is the coward hiding who left her like this?" Tunde swallowed and crossed his hands behind his back in a position of rest, adopting a strictly professional tone to soften the blow. "There is no European, Mr. Okoro. There never was any magnate. We checked migratory databases and global airline records. Amara Nwafor has not left Lagos in the last 9 months. She hasn't even stepped foot in an airport. The story of the millionaire lover in Paris was a fabricated lie." Chinedu felt the air snatched from his lungs. His fingers brushed the edge of the envelope. "A lie," he whispered, feeling a sharp buzzing in his ears. "Then why did she leave?" "Open the envelope, boss. You're not going to like the answers." Chinedu tore the manila paper violently. A stack of color photographs and dozens of financial documents fell scattered across the illuminated glass. The first photograph hit Chinedu directly in the center of the chest. It showed Amara in an old, worn sweater walking on a broken sidewalk in Agege, one of the most marginalized and dangerous areas of the city. She carried plastic grocery bags, and her belly was already very evident. In the second photo, Amara was climbing a rusted spiral staircase, clinging to the metal railing with an expression of absolute exhaustion. "Those are captures from neighborhood security cameras from 2 weeks ago," Tunde explained, pointing to the image. "That's her current address. She lives in a 1-2-square-meter corrugated iron and cement room on a rooftop. The bathroom is shared with 4 other tenants. She pays 1,500 naira in rent per month and is 2 months behind." "My God," Chinedu exclaimed, taking a step back, putting a hand to his chest as if he had been shot. "She was my wife. She owned all of this. Why is she living in misery? Why didn't she take money from our joint accounts before the divorce? I never blocked her cards until she disappeared." Tunde slid a bank statement across the glass, pushing it toward Chinedu. The numbers were highlighted in yellow fluorescent marker. "Sir, she emptied her personal accounts 3 days before asking for the divorce. She sold her Mercedes SUV, pawned all her jewels, including the 5-carat engagement ring you gave her. She sold off her designer handbags and branded clothes to pawn shops below their real value. She gathered almost 4 million naira in cash in less than 72 hours. Chinedu's brain collapsed. The financial math made no sense. 4 million naira, and she's living in a corrugated iron rooftop room, starving. That's impossible. What did she spend the money on? Drugs? Gambling? Tunde shook his head slowly, and the compassion in his tough military eyes was what truly terrified Chinedu. "She didn't spend it, sir. She transferred it. Every last kobo." Tunde pointed to a sheet of encrypted electronic transfers that his team had managed to decrypt that same morning. A single deposit of 3.9 million naira appears in a phantom account in the Cayman Islands. "We traced the parent account using federal intelligence contacts. That offshore account doesn't belong to any lover, Mr. Okoro. It belongs to the frontmen for Emeka Obinna and Dayo Adelakun. The names of the two men detonated in Chinedu's head like an atomic bomb. Emeka and Dayo, his former majority partners, the men Chinedu had discovered committing massive fraud in the construction company a year ago. Chinedu had expelled them from the company in a brutal board meeting, taking away their percentage and threatening to send them to a maximum security prison if they ever came near his empire again. What does Amara have to do with Emeka and Dayo? Chinedu felt the room spin. The cold light of the lamp burned his eyes. We reviewed the security cameras around your mansion from 9 months ago, exactly 2 days before Mrs. Amara asked for the divorce. Do you remember you were on a business trip to New York that week? Chinedu nodded mechanically. Cold sweat began to bead on his forehead. Tunde took one last photograph from the bottom of the envelope. It was dark, grainy, taken by a street camera, but the image was unmistakable. It showed the wrought iron entrance of the Okoro mansion. And there, standing in front of the door, intercepting Amara, who had just gotten out of her car, were Emeka and Dayo, flanked by 2 armed men. They intercepted her when she was alone, sir, Tunde said, his voice grave and somber. According to underworld informants I contacted an hour ago, Emeka and Dayo had in their possession forged documents and bought witnesses sufficient to incriminate you for the fraud they committed. The false evidence was perfect, Chinedu. If they presented it to a federal judge, you would not only lose the company, you would spend 20 years in a maximum security prison. Chinedu's knees buckled. He had to grab the edge of the glass desk to keep from falling to the floor. Air wouldn't enter his lungs. They extorted Amara. Tunde continued mercilessly, uncovering the well of horror. They demanded 4 million naira in cash to hand over the only copy of that false evidence and leave you alone. And they set one more condition. She had to divorce you and disappear. If you tried to find the extortionists or if she told you a single word about the blackmail, they would kill you and her. The silence that filled the 40th floor office was deafening. Chinedu looked down at the scattered photos. Amara walking in a torn sweater. Amara sleeping on a mattress on the floor. Amara cleaning tables at the Royal Plate to earn tips and pay 1,500 naira in rent. She hadn't betrayed him. She hadn't left him for another man. She had abandoned him to save his life and his empire. She had taken on the role of the cruel villain, enduring his hatred and resentment for 9 months because it was the only way to protect him. She sold every last drop of her dignity to pay the ransom for Chinedu's freedom. And the baby, oh God, the baby. Chinedu covered his mouth with his hand, stifling a guttural sob, a sound torn from the depths of his soul. Hot, furious tears sprang from his dark eyes, falling onto the glass desk and staining the financial documents. If there was no European lover, if she had never been with another man, if the 9 months coincided perfectly with the last week they slept together before she signed the divorce, the baby. Chinedu's voice broke into 1,000 pieces, drowning in tears. He fell to his knees on the grey carpet of his luxury office, clutching his chest, shattered by the level of sacrifice his wife had made. The baby is mine. That child is mine. The most powerful man in the city, the ruthless businessman who felt no pity for anyone, collapsed on the floor, crying like a child as he realized what he had done. He had humiliated the mother of his child. He had left her alone in a dark alley, rubbing her tired belly while he looked at her with disgust. Tunde stepped forward, crouching beside him. Mr. Okoro, get up. We have a much worse problem. Chinedu looked up, his eyes red and his face bathed in tears. What could be worse than this nightmare? Tunde handed him a last paper, a medical report from a community clinic. When we traced her medical visits, we discovered this. Mrs. Amara did not go to work at the Royal Plate today. Her shift supervisor sent her to the public clinic 3 hours ago. Her severe malnutrition and the extreme stress she was subjected to last night caused fatal complications. Chinedu. She has severe preeclampsia. Chinedu felt the world stop completely. She's in the emergency room at Lagos University Teaching Hospital, and the doctors say she and the baby won't make it through tonight. Chinedu Okoro doesn't remember getting up. He doesn't remember crossing the glass doors of his corporate office, or the dizzying descent in the private elevator from the 40th floor. His mind had fractured, leaving only space for a primitive and desperate instinct to reach her. The elevator doors opened in the underground parking lot. The keys! Give me the damn keys! Chinedu roared, snatching the armored SUV's remote from his chauffeur, who recoiled in fright against the concrete wall. Tunde ran behind him, getting into the co-driver's seat, just as the SUV's V8 engine roared with a deafening ferocity. Tires screeched against the polished pavement, leaving a trail of black smoke and burning rubber as Chinedu accelerated toward the exit ramp. The speedometer needle shot up. It was 4:32 a.m. The streets of Lagos were empty, shrouded in the grayish mist of dawn. Chinedu drove like a man possessed, running red lights, crossing main avenues at over 160 kilometers per hour. His hands gripped the leather-wrapped steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles seemed about to burst through his skin. In his head, the words from the previous night repeated like relentless torture. "I pity you, Amara. I hope minimum wage is enough for your pride." Chinedu let out a choked cry, a guttural sound that resonated inside the luxury cabin. He punched his chest with a clenched fist, trying to tear out the physical pain that crushed his lungs. "It was me, Tunde," Chinedu shouted, his voice torn by tears. "It was me who pushed her to the limit. Yesterday I cornered her in that alley. I yelled that she was trash. I let that imbecile manager humiliate her in front of me. She was saving my life, and I was destroying her." Tunde, clinging to the safety handle due to the vehicle's suicidal speed, pulled out his phone. "Sir, focus on the road. I've already contacted the head of surgery at Echo Hospital. I have 3 private specialists en route to Luth. They have orders to transfer her to the best intensive care suite in the country as soon as we arrive. Money will not be an issue." "I don't give a damn about money," Chinedu roared, his eyes bloodshot, tears blurring his vision. "If she dies, Tunde, if my son isn't born, I'm going to burn this entire city down, starting with myself." In the distance, the emergency lights of Lagos University Teaching Hospital cut through the darkness. It was a huge, grey building, worn by time and lack of budget, a place saturated with pain and deficiencies, the exact opposite of the world of marble and gold in which Chinedu had lived while his pregnant wife cleaned tables to survive. Chinedu braked the SUV abruptly, encroaching on the ambulance lane, and got out before the engine completely shut off. He ran toward the emergency doors. The impact of reality inside the hospital was like being hit with a baseball bat to the stomach. The waiting room was a suffocating chaos. Dozens of people slept in hard plastic chairs. Women cried in corners. The smell of cheap disinfectant mixed with sweat and sickness. Fluorescent lights flickered, casting a deathly pallor on the peeling walls. Chinedu crossed the room, pushing people aside without ceremony. His imposing figure in the navy blue designer suit, now wrinkled and without a tie, clashed violently with the misery of the place. He reached the reception counter, a dirty armored glass partition behind which an exhausted nurse typed on an old computer. "Amara Okafor," Chinedu demanded, hitting the glass with his open palm. "Where is she? She was admitted 3 hours ago." The nurse looked up, irritated. "Sir, quiet down. This is a hospital. You have to take a number and wait." "I will not wait a single damn second," Chinedu bellowed, his voice echoing throughout the emergency room, making the security guards at the door stand at attention. "I am Chinedu Okoro. I will buy this entire hospital and fire you and every damn executive if you don't tell me which bed my wife is in within the next 5 seconds. Tunde arrived just behind, showing his military ID and intervening before the guards drew their batons. "It's a critical emergency, ma'am. Patient with severe preeclampsia. Amara Okafor, please." The nurse paled at the men's tone and quickly checked the screen. "Shock area at the end of the hall, past the red doors. But you can't go in there. It's restricted access." Chinedu didn't wait for her to finish the sentence. He ran toward the red double doors, pushing them open with both arms. The shock area was an inferno of movement, machines beeping frantically, nurses running with IV bags, doctors shouting orders, and there, in bed number 4, separated only by a stained fabric curtain, he found her. Chinedu's world stopped. Oxygen left the room. Amara lay on the white sheets, pale as marble. Her lips, once full and pink, now had a bluish, cracked tone. She had oxygen tubes in her nose and 3 IV lines inserted into her thin, bruised arms. The disgusting orange cleaning uniform had been cut with scissors to place the monitors, exposing her enormous 8. But what definitively broke Chinedu's soul was not the tubes or the machines. It was seeing her hands. Amara's hands, falling limply at the sides of the bed, were covered in sores, cuts, and chemical burns from using industrial bleach without protective gloves. The man who controlled the financial destiny of half the country fell to his knees beside the cheap metal bed. "My love," Chinedu whispered, his voice broken, drowning in his own tears. "Amara, my God, what did they do to you? What did I let them do to you?" He took one of those battered hands, bringing it to his lips and kissing each scar, each burn. bathing her skin with fervent tears. Forgive me, my life, please, don't leave me. I beg you, don't leave me. The cardiac monitor alarms above the bed began to beep with a sharp, rapid, terrifying cadence. The green line went up and down erratically. Sir, you have to get out of here now, an orderly shouted, trying to pull Chinedu away from the gurney. I won't let go, Chinedu roared, clinging to his wife's hand as if it were a lifesaver in the middle of the ocean. A young doctor with a wrinkled gown, deep dark circles under his eyes, and a face hardened by 1,000 lost battles in the emergency room, pushed his way through the curtains. It was Dr. Namdi, the head of the shift. Clear the area. Prepare 100 milligrams of IV Labetalol. Her pressure is already 190/120, the doctor ordered, checking the monitor screen before fixing his furious eyes on Chinedu. Who the hell are you? And what are you doing in my shock area? Security. Get him out of here. Tunde intercepted the guards at the curtain's entrance, forming an impassable wall with his body. Chinedu slowly stood up, without letting go of Amara's hand. His dark eyes, flooded with tears, reflected the ferocity of a wounded lion. I am Chinedu Okoro, she is my wife, and it is my child in her womb. Doctor? Namdi stopped dead, looked at Chinedu's $1,000 suit, looked at his Swiss watch, and then looked at the malnourished, dirty, and broken patient wearing a cheap janitor's uniform. Indignation crossed the doctor's face like lightning. The husband? The doctor let out a bitter, contemptuous laugh, taking a step toward Chinedu until he was centimeters from his face. He didn't care about the magnate's money or aura of power. In his emergency room, he was the ultimate authority. Where the hell have you been for the last 8 months, Mr. Okoro? The impact of the question hit Chinedu squarely in the face. He wanted to answer, wanted to explain the deception, the extortion by his partners, the damned pride that had blinded him, but the words died in his throat. Everything sounded like empty excuses in front of his wife's agonizing body. I was an imbecile, Chinedu managed to articulate, his voice broken by absolute regret. I was blind, but I'm here now. I have the 3 best specialists from Eco Hospital waiting outside. I demand you transfer her immediately. I've already ordered a medical helicopter. I'm taking her to private intensive care. Dr. Namdi shook his head, his expression turning somber, almost ominous. Save your wallet, Mr. Okoro. You cannot move her anywhere. If I move her from this bed, if I put her in an ambulance or a helicopter, your wife will go into cardiac arrest before she reaches the parking lot, and the baby will suffocate in minutes. You stay here. Chinedu felt the blood freeze in his veins. Panic, raw and suffocating, completely paralyzed him. What's wrong with her? Chinedu whispered, terror disfiguring his features. Tell me exactly what's wrong and how I fix it. Dr. Namdi took a gray aluminum folder from the foot of the bed and threw it at Chinedu's chest. Chinedu caught it instinctively. Read it yourself, since you seem to have answers for everything. The doctor spat, adjusting Amara's oxygen mask. It's not just preeclampsia, Okoro. Your wife is dying of chronic exhaustion and severe malnutrition. Her hemoglobin level is 7. She is anemic. This woman's body has been consuming itself to keep the baby alive. Chinedu opened the folder. The medical numbers danced before his eyes, but the paramedics' marginal notes, who picked her up at the restaurant, were direct daggers to his heart. Patient found unconscious. 14-hour daily work shifts on her feet. Minimal caloric intake in recent months. Severe post-traumatic stress. I checked her belongings looking for an emergency contact, the doctor continued, pointing to a cheap, torn cloth bag in the corner of the room. She didn't have a kobo to buy a bottle of water, Mr. Okoro, but she had her pawn shop receipts. She's been pawning even her shoes to pay for consultations at a neighborhood clinic, making sure the baby received the vitamins she wasn't consuming. Chinedu walked clumsily toward the plastic chair, picked up Amara's old cloth bag, and opened it with trembling hands. Inside, there was no designer makeup or gold cards. There was a mended sweater, an empty Tupperware with remnants of white rice, 3 crumpled pawn shop receipts, and in a protective plastic envelope, perfectly preserved, unlike the rest of her things, a black and white ultrasound. Chinedu pulled out the image. It was a perfect profile, a small nose, a forehead, the miracle of life breaking through the hell she had endured in solitude. On the bottom edge, in Amara's cursive handwriting, was a phrase written in blue ink, "So your daddy stays safe, my love." Chinedu's crying erupted uncontrollably, shattering any facade of a tough man he had left. He fell onto the bed, hugging Amara's swollen belly, staining the white sheet with his tears of agony. Wake up, please, Amara, wake up. Chinedu cried, caressing his wife's cold face. I know everything now. I know what you did for me. I know you sold your life to save me from those damn bastards. Don't die. For God's sake, don't leave this empty empire without you. Dr. Namdi watched him, his anger slowly dissolving before the rawness of the magnate's pain, understanding that the story behind that tragedy was much darker than simple abandonment. Mr. Okoro, the doctor said, his voice lowering, adopting a cold, clinical urgency. Blood pressure isn't yielding. Amara's kidneys are starting to fail due to preeclampsia. Chinedu looked up, his eyes swollen. What does that mean? The doctor looked at the monitors, then at Amara's belly. It means your wife's body can no longer support the pregnancy. The extreme stress she suffered last night was the final trigger. The placenta is detaching. The sharp, continuous sound of the fetal monitor began to beep in the small room, filling the space with the warning of imminent death. The baby's heart rate was dropping drastically. Code red in room 4, Dr. Namdi shouted toward the hallway, his voice cutting the air with the authority of controlled panic. Stop operating room 2. Call neonatology immediately. The swinging doors burst open. 4 nurses rushed in, unlocking the brakes on Amara's gurney. Where are you taking her? Chinedu stood in the way, terrified, refusing to let go of her hand. To the operating room, Okoro, the doctor yelled, pushing him aside. We have to get that child out in the next 10 minutes, or they both will die on this gurney. Quick, push. Chinedu ran alongside the gurney down the long hallway illuminated by white fluorescent lights. The wheels screeched against the linoleum floor. Amara remained unconscious, her head swaying with the movement, her breathing shallow and irregular. I love you. I love you with my whole life. Resist, my love, Chinedu whispered in her ear, running beside her until they reached the heavy metal doors of the surgical area. This far, Mr. Okoro. A robust security guard blocked his path with both arms. The double doors slammed shut. Through the small glass of the door, Chinedu watched as Amara's gurney disappeared under the powerful lights of the operating room. He stood there in the empty hallway, his hands stained with his wife's cold sweat, his son's crumpled ultrasound in his fist, and his soul hanging by a thread. The man who yesterday believed he controlled everything could only beg on his knees to fate for a chance to redeem himself. The hallway outside the operating rooms was an endless tunnel of white light, cold and aseptic. Chinedu Okoro, the man who made the country's most ruthless boardrooms tremble, sat on the linoleum floor with his back against the wall, staring fixedly at his own hands. They were stained with blood, Amara's blood. The clock hanging above the double metal doors showed 5:47 a.m. He had endured an hour and 15 minutes of pure agony. Every second that the red surgery in progress light remained on, he felt a hydraulic press crushing his ribs. Tunde, standing stoically a couple of meters away, maintained guard, rejecting urgent calls from the company. Nothing mattered. Chinedu's real estate empire could burn to the ground at that very instant, and he wouldn't care at all. The sepulchral silence of the hallway was torn by the sound of hurried footsteps and someone running, out of breath. The doors at the end burst open. A robust woman in her 50s crossed the threshold. She wore her street clothes poorly over the royal plate uniform. Her face was drenched in sweat and tears. It was Mama Bimpi, Amara's colleague, the only person who had shown a glimmer of humanity toward her in that restaurant hell. Amara, where is Amara Nwafor? Mama Bimpi cried, her voice echoing off the sterile walls, desperately looking for a nurse. They called me from the night shift. They said she was brought in code red. Tunde stepped forward to intercept her as per security protocol, but Chinedu raised a trembling hand from the floor, silently ordering him to let her pass. Chinedu recognized the woman. He had seen her out of the corner of his eye last night, watching in terror from the kitchen as Bode humiliated his ex-wife. Mama Bimpe stopped dead upon seeing the magnate sprawled on the hospital floor. Her gaze shifted from absolute surprise to a boiling, deep, visceral hatred. She didn't care about Chinedu's expensive suit or the presence of the giant bodyguard. She advanced until she stood in front of him, pointing a trembling finger. You, Mama Bimpe spat with a contempt that made Chinedu look up. You're the scoundrel from last night, the monster. You came to finish the job. You came to see if the humiliation you put her through last night finally killed her. Chinedu swallowed. The lump in his throat was so large he could barely breathe. He slowly stood up, leaning against the wall. He didn't defend himself. He didn't raise his voice. His bloodshot eyes and face distorted by pain took Mama Bimpi by surprise, but the woman didn't back down. I'm her husband, Chinedu said, his voice reduced to a hoarse, fractured thread. I'm the baby's father. Mama Bimpe's eyes widened. The impact of the revelation seemed to paralyze her for a second. Then she let out a bitter, dry, venomous laugh. The husband? Mama Bimpe closed the distance, fixing her eyes on Chinedu's. Where the hell was the husband when that girl cried until she vomited in the restaurant bathroom because she didn't even have money for a paracetamol? Where was the father of the year when she ate scraps from customers' plates because she hadn't eaten for 3 days, just so she could pay for the clinic? Every word from Mama Bimpe was a point-blank shot to Chinedu's chest. He already knew the cold facts thanks to Tunde. He knew about the extortion by his ex-partners. He knew about the 4 million naira transferred to the Cayman Islands. He knew about the death threat that forced her to pretend she didn't love him. But the rawness of what Amara had lived day after day, the physical reality of her sacrifice, was gutting him alive. I didn't know, Chinedu whispered, closing his eyes tightly, letting tears flow again. She lied to me to protect me. I thought she had abandoned me for another. Of course, she protected you, you blind fool, Mama Bimpe exploded, hitting Chinedu's chest with both hands. An act for which Tunde would have broken necks in any other circumstance. But Chinedu let himself be hit, receiving the punishment he felt he deserved. That girl came asking for work 8 months ago, trembling like a leaf. She was terrified that men in black suits would find her. She hid every time a luxury car passed on the avenue. She sold her coats in the middle of December to buy cheap blankets. And all the damn time, she caressed her belly and whispered to her baby that everything would be all right, that the sacrifice was worth it because his daddy was safe. Chinedu covered his face with his hands, sobbing uncontrollably, his shoulders trembling violently. I lent her money for bus fare, Mama Bimpe continued, her own voice breaking with tears. I begged her to rest, not to carry the heavy trays, but she said she couldn't, that if they kicked her out of that rooftop room, the baby would be born on the street. And yesterday when you appeared, I saw her soul fall to the floor. You were the hero of her stories, the man she was letting herself die of starvation for, and you looked at her with disgust. You let Bode treat her like trash. Enough, Chinedu pleaded, falling to his knees again, shattered into 1,000 pieces, his forehead touching the cold hospital floor. Please, just stop. I was an imbecile. I was a coward blinded by pride. I would give my whole life this cursed instant to be on that operating table in her place. Mama Bimpe looked down at the most powerful man in the city, reduced to ashes by the weight of his own arrogance. The woman's fury slowly transformed into deep pity. She half knelt and placed a hand on his shoulder. Then pray to God that she is stronger than your pride, Mr. Okoro, Mama Bimpe whispered harshly. Because last night, after you left, I found her collapsed in the garbage alley. She was losing blood. She told me she couldn't take it anymore. She told me, at least he hates me enough not to look for me ever again. He's safe now. The metallic sound of the double doors opening interrupted the sentence. The red surgery light turned off. Chinedu sprang from the floor, wiping his tear-stained face. His breathing completely halted. Dr. Namdi emerged from the operating room. His green gown was stained with dark blood. He removed his surgical mask, revealing a face gaunt from exhaustion, bathed in sweat. He sighed deeply and looked at Chinedu. Doctor? Chinedu could barely pronounce the word, absolute terror chilling his blood. The doctor nodded slowly. We lost her twice on the table. We had to use the defibrillator. The doctor paused, measuring his words in front of the magnate on the verge of collapse. But your wife has the survival instinct of a wild animal defending its young. She survived the emergency C-section, and we managed to stop the internal hemorrhage. Chinedu let out a choked cry, leaning against the wall, feeling his soul return to his body. Mama Bimpe covered her mouth, breaking into tears of relief. And my son? Chinedu asked, his heart pounding 1,000 beats per hour. The baby is alive. It's a boy, the doctor replied, offering a faint, compassionate smile. Premature, underweight, and with severe respiratory difficulties. He has just been intubated and transferred to the neonatal intensive care unit in an incubator. The battle has just begun for him, but he is breathing, Mr. Okoro. Your wife, against all medical and human odds, managed to keep him alive long enough. I want to see her. I need to see her right now, Chinedu demanded, desperation injecting him with new energy. She's in the post-operative recovery room. She's barely regaining consciousness from the anesthesia, the doctor warned. She's extremely weak. A strong fright or a stress spike right now could cause a heart attack. Go in alone, and for God's sake, try not to upset her. Chinedu nodded frantically, left Mama Bimpe crying. Hugging Tunde, gently pushed open the doors of the sterilized hallway. and walked toward the room at the end. He was going to reclaim his family. The recovery room was in semi-darkness. The only sound was the constant, miraculous, rhythmic beep of the cardiac monitor. It smelled of iodine, strong disinfectant, and freshly laundered sheets. Chinedu stopped at the threshold, feeling the air thicken. Amara was in the center bed. She looked like a broken porcelain doll. Her skin had a translucent pallor, her hair was matted to her forehead with cold sweat, and her arms, bruised from the IVs of the blood transfusion, rested inert on the white blankets. The immense bulging of her belly had disappeared, leaving a bandaged flatness that evidenced the brutal procedure she had just undergone. Chinedu advanced slowly, terrified that the sound of his shoes would break the fragile bubble of life that kept his wife breathing. He stopped beside the metal railing of the bed. He observed the face he had loved every day of his adult life, the face he had hated for 9 months because of a lie fabricated to save his life. The level of devotion this woman had shown him was something he, with all his power and money, could never repay in 1,000 lifetimes. Slowly, as if her eyelids weighed tons of lead, Amara began to react. Her eyelashes trembled, her brown eyes opened, disoriented, blurred by narcotics, trying to focus on the gray ceiling of the room. Her gaze slowly lowered and met the figure in the navy blue suit standing beside her bed. Amara's entire body tensed abruptly. Terror returned to her eyes with the force of a tsunami. The heart rate monitor began to accelerate its beeping drastically. Amara tried to sit up, ignoring the sharp, excruciating pain of the C-section stitches in her abdomen. "No, no," Amara whispered, her voice sounding like sandpaper, raising a weak hand to push Chinedu's chest. "Chinedu, go. Get out of here." "Calm down, my love. Calm down. Don't move." Chinedu held her by the shoulders with extreme delicacy, gently forcing her back onto the pillows. "You don't understand," Amara sobbed, breathing agitatedly, tears of pure panic overflowing down her pale cheeks. "They're going to see you. If they know you're with me, if they suspect you discovered something, they'll put you in prison. They have evidence, Chinedu. They'll destroy you. They'll kill you. Please, leave. Pretend I don't exist. Hate me, but go." The level of sacrifice shattered him. Even now, freshly operated, having been a minute from death, her only instinct, her only thought, was to protect him. The real estate magnate, the man who never lowered his gaze to anyone in the country, fell heavily to his knees on the floor of the room. The sound of the thud echoed off the 4 walls. Chinedu intertwined his clean, large hands with his wife's small, cracked, and bruised hands. He clung to them and rested his forehead against the metal railing of the bed, surrendering completely. "It's over, Amara," Chinedu said, raising his tear-streaked face, his voice firm but laden with absolute devotion. "The hell is over. I know everything." Amara stopped struggling. The cardiac monitor abruptly stabilized its rhythm, as if her heart had skipped a beat. What? She stammered, unable to believe it. "I know everything," Chinedu repeated, squeezing her hands and kissing her injured knuckles. "I know the names. Emeka Obina, Dayo Adelakun. I know about the account in the Cayman Islands, and I know about the thugs who intercepted you at the mansion door. I know you sold your rings, your clothes, your whole world to pay the ransom for my freedom. I know you left me, knowing I would hate you, just to save my life." The impact of Chinedu's words broke Amara's last wall of resistance. The icy mask she had worn for 9 months of agony and humiliation crumbled completely. A primitive sob, laden with pain, loneliness, and relief, escaped her throat. "I was so scared, Chinedu," Amara cried, squeezing her husband's hand with all her might. "Every day I thought they were going to harm you. When you yelled at me last night in the alley, I thought I had lost you forever. You never lost me." Chinedu rose from the floor, sitting on the edge of the bed, and carefully put his arms around Amara's shoulders, pulling her to his chest. He held her as if she were the most fragile crystal in the universe. "I never stopped loving you, not for a single second, even when pride blinded me. Forgive me for doubting you. Forgive me for not seeing that the love of my life was immolating herself for me. Forgive me for letting you fall into that misery." Amara buried her face in Chinedu's stained and wrinkled shirt, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne, feeling safe for the first time in almost a year. They cried together, clinging to each other in that gloomy hospital room, purging the poison of separation. After a few minutes, Amara pulled back slightly, her eyes injected with sudden panic. Her hands flew instinctively to her flat belly. "The baby!" she gasped, terrified. "Chinedu, my baby, tell me I didn't lose him. He's alive." Chinedu smiled through his tears, stroking his wife's sweaty hair, looking at her with the greatest adoration a man could profess. "Our son is alive, my love. He's a warrior just like his mother. He's in the incubator recovering, but he's alive and safe." Amara closed her eyes and dropped her head onto the pillows, emitting a sigh of relief that released all the air from her lungs. "Our son," she murmured with an exhausted smile gracing her gaunt face. Chinedu looked at her in silence for a few seconds. Love and guilt swirled within him, but were quickly replaced by a different energy, darker, colder. The men who had done this to his wife, the cowards who forced her to clean garbage, 8 months pregnant, under death threats, were going to pay with blood. This was no longer about corporate business. This was a personal war, and Chinedu Okoro was going to use the full weight of his empire to erase them from the face of the earth. "You're going to rest now," Chinedu whispered, kissing her forehead. "You're going to get strong for our son. I promise you on my own life that no one in this damned world will ever touch you again. The fear ends today." Amara opened her eyes, noticing the murderous glint in her husband's pupils. She knew Chinedu. She knew the man of steel was about to unleash his true power. "Chinedu, what are you going to do?" Chinedu stood up, adjusting his ruined suit, adopting a posture that projected unbreakable, dark, and lethal power. "Emeka and Dayo believe they stole my empire by blackmailing my wife," Chinedu replied, his voice echoing in the empty room like a death sentence. "I'm going to show them what happens when you wake the true owner of hell. From today, I dictate the rules, and I won't leave them even the ashes." The awakening of the beast. Chinedu Okoro emerged from the recovery room, his face transformed. The vulnerability and tears of the last minutes had evaporated, giving way to a surgical coldness. His footsteps echoed in the hallway like hammer blows. Tunde, who was waiting outside, immediately stood at attention, noticing the aura of death emanating from his boss. "Tunde," Chinedu said without stopping, "I want the assault team men in position. We are no longer collecting information, we are executing." "Sir, Emeka and Dayo are in a private meeting at the Metropolitan Club, celebrating the close of the quarter," Tunde reported, matching the magnate's swift pace. "They believe you are still holed up in your office or your luxury restaurant. They have no idea we found Mrs. Amara." Chinedu stopped in front of a large window overlooking the city. The sun began to peek over the Lagos mountains, tinting the sky a violent red. "They think they have me cornered with their false evidence," Chinedu murmured, his voice dropping to a lethal register. "They don't know that last night I bought the Royal Plate building. They don't know that I have the complete file of their original fraud that my wife paid to conceal. And most importantly, they don't know they just turned a businessman into a butcher." He pulled out his phone and dialed a high-priority number. "Prosecutor General. Chinedu Okoro, speaking." "Yes, that's right. I have a package of evidence involving money laundering, aggravated extortion, and attempted murder. I want arrest warrants ready within the hour. I don't care who you have to wake up. If the judge doesn't sign, I will buy the courthouse myself." Chinedu returned to the entrance of the neonatal ICU before leaving. Through the glass, he saw the small incubator where his son, a tiny being connected to wires, fought for every breath. The child had the same strong features as his father and the unbreakable resilience of his mother. "Resist, little one," Chinedu whispered against the glass. "Your daddy is going to clean up the world so you and your mommy never have to be scared again." Minutes later, 3 black armored SUVs sped out of the hospital. Chinedu was in the back seat, reviewing a tablet with his enemy's final bank movements. Emeka and Dayo had made a fatal mistake, underestimating the love of a man who has nothing to lose because he has already recovered everything. The operation was swift and silent. As the sun finished rising, Chinedu's SUVs and 2 federal police patrol cars intercepted the ex-partners in the private parking lot of the club. Emeka, fat and arrogant, dropped his glass of whiskey upon seeing Chinedu get out of the vehicle. Dayo tried to run, but Tunde tackled him to the pavement before he took 3 steps. Chinedu approached Emeka, who trembled like a leaf. "See, Chinedu, this is a misunderstanding. We can negotiate," Emeka stammered. Chinedu didn't say a word. He delivered a dry blow to his stomach that knocked the air out of him and then leaned over him, whispering in his ear. "Amara Nwafor sends her regards from the hospital. She survived. And now you two are going to wish you had never been born. You're not going to a luxury cell, Emeka. You're going to the general population where prisoners know very well what happens to those who touch a pregnant woman." As the police led them away in handcuffs, Chinedu watched as their paper empires crumbled. He had recovered the evidence. He had destroyed his enemies, and for the first time in 9 months, he could breathe without feeling ashes in his lungs. The price of redemption. 3 months later, The Okoro mansion in Ikoyi was no longer the cold, silent mausoleum it once was. The garden was full of fresh flowers, and the air vibrated with a new energy. On the terrace, under the shade of a large oak tree, Amara sat in a wicker rocking chair. She wore a white silk dress that highlighted her recovered beauty. Although her hands still bore small scars marks, she refused to erase with laser surgery because they said she was a survivor. In her arms slept Chinedu Jr., the baby, who had spent 6 weeks in the incubator, now strong and healthy, with rosy cheeks that were the center of his parents' universe. Chinedu came out to the terrace, taking off his suit jacket, approached from behind, and kissed his wife's crown. Then he gently stroked the baby's tiny hand. "How are my treasures?" Chinedu asked, his voice filled with a tenderness that no one in the business world would believe possible. "We're well, Chinedu," Amara replied, giving him a radiant smile. "Mama Bimpe called a while ago. She says the renovation of the new restaurant is going wonderfully. The employees can't believe they're now business partners." Chinedu sat beside her. After the storm, his first action was to close the royal plate, fire abode with a lawsuit that left him on the streets, and reopen the place under the name Amara's Miracle. Handing over management and a portion of the shares to Mama Bimpe and his wife's former colleagues who helped her when she had nothing. "It's the least I could do," Chinedu said, taking Amara's hand. "But none of that compensates for what you went through. Sometimes I wake up at night and still see you in that orange alley." Amara placed a hand on his cheek, stopping his words. "That orange uniform stayed in the past, Chinedu. It was the price I paid for us to be here today. Don't see it as a humiliation, see it as our armor. It taught me that I'm stronger than I believed, and it taught me that you were worth every drop of sweat." Chinedu pulled her close, embracing her and the baby in a protective circle. The man of steel had learned that true power resided not in bank accounts or 4-story buildings, but in the ability to sacrifice for what one loves. "I promise," Chinedu whispered, looking at the city skyline he once wanted to conquer, and now simply inhabited with peace, "that the rest of my life will be to serve you and our son. Never again will you be alone, never again will there be secrets." Amara rested her head on her husband's shoulder. The afternoon sun bathed the scene with a golden light. The story that began with a fake divorce, an invented betrayal, and a humiliating cleaning uniform ended there with the victory of love over ambition. Chinedu Okoro, the magnate who had everything, finally understood that he was only truly rich the day he found his wife cleaning tables in the darkness, because that day his heart beat again. Justice had been done. The enemies were behind bars, and the family was united. The ghost of the orange uniform could finally rest in peace.